So today we're
I
going
was
to be
around
watching
10 years old when
5
this
true
happened.
horror stories animated.
Me and my two best friends and our parents were on a long
So it
vacation in
looks like
Turkey in
they're
a
on
very good and safe
vacation.
hotel. One night, me and my two best friends, who I'll call
Who
Team
would
and
leave
Phil
little
for
kids
this video,
alone
were staying at Team's room in the
in a
hotel
hotel
while our parents were in the hotel
with
restaurant.
creeps?
The room wasn't bad, actually all of our rooms seemed safe. At least we thought it was. We were having a lot of fun watching Simpsons and playing Monopoly,
The Simpsons.
but what happened that night still makes me have chills.
What happened, mate?
So it was around 1 a.m. and our parents were late. Phil looked at them through the window and said, "They're still in that stupid restaurant."
That stupid
Yeah.
restaurant.
They told us they'll come back until 11 p.m. I answered,
But it's 1 a.m.
Guys? Someone is knocking on the door.
Someone's
Tim said.
knocking on the door.
It's probably just room
But
service.
you didn't order room service, you
Phil
dumb
said.
kids.
Can we not open the door?
Yeah, that is totally me. Yeah, can
I
we just
said-
not open the door?
I was pretty scared in that situation. I was only 10, and my friends were only 2 and 3 years older than me. So we were all pretty much defenseless children in the room.
Grab weapons. Lock yourself in the
Tim,
bathroom.
who was the
or something.
oldest, answered, "Oh, come on, it's just room
You
service."
didn't order room service.
The guy on the other side of the door said,
Hello. Can you please open the door?
When he said that, we were all scared. In a couple of minutes of silence, he said in a louder voice,
Open the goddamn door!
I started crying because I knew he was in room service,
See, if you
because
want
if he
kids
was,
to open the door, you don't
he
just
would
shout,
have talked
open
in
the
Turkish.
goddamn door. You say, hey.
I was in shock
I got
as in
an
that
intelligence
moment
for
I
you.
realized that this strange guy is using a fake ID card to open the door. Tim grabbed both of us and we
Well,
ran to the
that's what I said in
bathroom
the
and
first
locked the
place.
door. Luckily, the guy wasn't fast to get us. He was screaming to open the door. I said, "Look, a phone!"
Look, a phone.
Luckily, Tim's mom left her phone so we could call her if we needed anything.
And now you realize that, wow.
So Phil grabbed the phone and called his dad and told them the situation. And they came up to find the guy nowhere. They thought we were lying to them until the
Lying?
hotel manager showed them the footage. We found out that the man was stalking us and a couple other children. In a couple of days, police had finally caught him. He was a serial rapist and a pedophile. We were just lucky he wasn't fast to get us. I will never forget that night, as that was the worst day of my life.
Don't think it might have been the worst day of your life if he'd done something. But he didn't, so you're safe. GG's. Creepy attempted kidnapping story.
When I was 15, my mother went
Animated.
out shopping and left me in charge of the house. It was starting to get dark and I realized my little brother was nowhere to be found. I asked my sister if she knew where he was and she said he had gone to the park around the corner to kick his soccer ball around.
Who lets a kid out at late
I told her to
night?
watch the house while I was
Pitch
gone
black
and
to
ran
kick a
off
ball
to the
about.
direction of the park.
I would let them
When I
out
got
at 1
there,
o'clock and say, be
I
back
was
by
surprised
6.
to find the park
Or I'll give you
completely
a
empty.
whooping.
I
I'll
called
get
out
the
my
father.
brother's name, but there was no answer. I started to get worried, and all of a sudden I heard a faint muffled noise coming from my left.
Ooh,
I turned just in time to see a tall figure disappearing behind a large
go
fence.
smack them. Go.
I sprinted as fast as I could. When I came around to the other side of the fence, I saw something that almost made me choke in horror. My little brother was being dragged down the alleyway by a tall man. I flew into a rage and tears of anger streamed down my
Adrenaline.
face. I ran at him and he must have heard me coming because he turned around and faced me and he dropped my younger brother.
Drop them.
The
Spear
tall
him.
man tried to grab me, but I was running at him so fast that when I
Spear
slammed
by
into
Roman
him, it
Reigns.
knocked him off his feet.
Get down.
He swore and tried to get back up, but I just started
Don't let
stomping
him.
on
Yeah,
his
yeah,
face.
yeah. That's what you do.
Without
That's a
stopping
bad
to
guy,
ask
right?
questions,
And you
I
get him
picked
down.
my
just
brother up and ran
pick-
as fast as
beat
I
him
could
up.
back to our
'Cause if
house.
He's gonna try to get up and do something.
By this time, it was
Beat
pitch
him
black
up, man.
outside and my mother was home. She was frantic with worry, and when she saw the look on our face, she realized that something bad had happened.
Hugs. 3 hugs.
As I explained, my brother and I started crying, and my mom gave us both the biggest hug ever, and she cried with us. Eventually, the police were called, but this guy was never found.
Yeet. You know you can have my soccer ball or football. I'ma just go back home right in a bit, boys.
This story takes place when I was a junior high school student.
True countryside horror story anime.
One morning during summer vacation, after my father went to work, my mother and I decided to visit my maternal grandmother, who
Yeah, go
lived
visit
in
your
a
grandma.
rural area. Since my grandmother's house was located in the countryside, getting there required making a left turn, then driving for 5 minutes through a narrow,
Wait, I didn't
one-car
go to the
wide,
countryside,
unpaved road.
No countryside.
There
fam.
were
I like
rice
my- I
fields
don't
and
do that.
forest on the sides of the
I
unpaved
like my
road.
house. No countrysides, fam.
As soon as we arrived, I greeted my grandmother, then went into my youngest uncle's room. I used to like visiting my grandmother's house because my uncle was a huge gaming fan, and his
Yeah, gam
computer
back
was
and
much
forth.
better than mine at
Can
home.
get the dubs, kill the nubs, and
So
get the
once I
nubs.
confirmed my uncle was at work,
Oh, his headshot up
I
for
turned
90.
on his computer
And
and
he-
started playing Doom 3, which used to be the most popular game once upon a time.
What are you?
After playing the game for about an hour or two, my uncle returned from work. Upon his arrival, my grandmother asked him to take her grocery shopping, since my
About
mother,
Fortnite.
my
Why are
aunt,
you
and
playing
I
that
were
trash
visiting
zombie
her
killer
house.
4 game or whatever it was
So
called.
at about 7 p.m., they all
7
drove
p.m.?
to town to do some grocery shopping.
So you were
I
left
was
home alone.
super
and you
excited
mad?
and waved goodbye to them. Since I think it is unnecessary to explain why I was excited, I'll just leave it. After enjoying about 90 minutes of free time,
Or did
my
you get to
uncle
watch
called.
inappropriate-
He said he was
Never.
about to turn left on the road, but one of the front wheels was punctured, and asked me to bring him a new tire which was in the storage shed.
No, don't do it, man.
As I said before, after making that left turn, it took about 5 minutes to drive through a narrow,
do
unpaved
it. I'll say, no,
single-lane
can you come
road
back
to
to
see my
Star?
grandmother's house.
Nah,
But
fam,
it took
don't
about
do it.
20
It's
to
dumb.
30 minutes on foot. Now that I think about it, it was quite scary to walk on that road,
Now you
especially
think
at night. It had no streetlights and was surrounded by rice fields and forests.
Run, leg it.
It was almost 9 p.m., and that area got quite dark at about 8 because it was
Tell
in the
them to meet
country.
you halfway or come back
So to be
themselves.
honest,
I would be gone.
was really
I'll be
scared.
Like, nah, you come
But
get it
not
yourself.
wanting
Or
anyone
meet
to
me
know
halfway.
I was a
ain't doing this
coward,
entire
I
half
decided
an
to
hour.
go. I grabbed the tire, left the house, and started walking along the
Why would you
unpaved
rule it?
road.
Pick it up and leg it, fam.
I could see my uncle shining his car's headlights toward me. That said, he was still quite far away from me, and the headlights looked like 2 big yellow dots. I was a bit relieved knowing my uncle and family were on the other end of this road, but the night was dark, which deepened my
Run.
fear. You know, when you walk in the darkness, your eyes adjust, and you start to see unclear shapes.
Bruh.
I felt like I could see someone standing in the rice field, and someone sitting down, resting his chin on his hands and looking at me through the bushes.
Nah, raw, run.
I broke out in a cold sweat and held my legs to keep them from shaking.
Run, leg it.
It
Don't
felt
rule the
scarier
tire.
than being
Pick it
alone
up
on a
and
pitch dark
absolutely-
night. And because of the fear and the delusion I had created, I remember feeling really dizzy. After walking for about 20 minutes, I looked towards my uncle's car
Run.
and realized I was nearly there.
That's not your uncle.
Feeling happier,
I
I
just
rolled
know
the
it.
tire faster. I rushed to hand over the tire to him as soon as
It's not
possible,
your uncle.
but saw something in front of me. I wasn't sure what it was because it was still a bit away from me, but it was something dark. Suddenly, I felt strange and slowed down. Since I wanted to determine what it was while still having some distance, I strained my head and neck trying to look carefully, but it was too dark. Although I was scared, I started to walk again, thinking nothing
your
is going to
uncle.
happen because I have my uncle and
Go
family
and drop
about
kick its
300
head and
meters
then
away.
pick up the tire and leg it.
But when I got closer to it, I stopped because it became clearly visible.
Don't stop.
It was an old woman squatting with her mouth open, looking at the rice fields.
Drop kick
I
it.
could only see the side of her face, but my whole body shivered because her blank facial expression with her mouth open
Drop
was
kick
now
it.
clearly
Pick
visible
up the
in
tire
the darkness.
and leg it. Bloody.
Without realizing it, I walked really close to the old woman.
Just gonna
For
jump scare you.
reasons I don't understand,
You did. Rest in peace,
Walking
young
by
boy.
without saying
That's why I said
anything
dropkick in the first
seemed
place.
even scarier, so I started talking to her. With a
That's starting to get
frightened
me
voice,
mad.
I
Just
asked,
dropkick it.
"Excuse me, what are you doing here at night?" But she did not respond and kept
Oh, she's in
looking at the
respond.
rice
If
field.
she's clearly about to die,
On the
drop
verge
kick her
of
so she dies
crying,
quicker,
I
and
shouted,
you can get to your uncle. That's what I
"Excuse
thought.
me!" She then looked at me, and I felt my heart tightening. Even though it was dark, I could clearly see she had permed white
Bro,
hair,
no, that's
and I
not
could
for me.
only see the white parts of
So
her
I said
eyes.
drop kick her in the first place.
The
Now you're gonna get
scariest
murdered.
thing
Rip,
were
rip,
the
rip,
huge
rip, rip.
wrinkles and stains covering her face and her wide open mouth.
How long is that for this video?
I felt strange, like I was going crazy while looking at her. I had eye contact,
It's the Undertaker.
but was looking down while she was looking up at me. After a few moments of eye contact, she turned her body toward me. Oh my gosh, I thought she was sitting down, but realized she had no lower body. She only had a torso and head which was supported from the ground with 2 arms. A flood of thoughts crossed my mind, but I remember thinking, there is Satan right in front of me. I felt like she was going to run into me with her 2 arms if I didn't move, so I grabbed the tire in my arms and sprinted with my eyes
Not in
closed
the first
tightly.
place.
Without remembering how long I'd been running, I suddenly felt relieved. It was the next morning, and I was in my grandmother's room. When I asked my mother what happened, she said she was waiting for me in the car and saw me sprinting with my head down, holding the tire in my arms, and suddenly fell off the road, causing my family to come out of the
No,
car
not for me.
shocked. After listening to my mother, I told her and my other family members what I went through. Thinking I had suffered a heat stroke, that evening my grandmother made me chicken soup. My uncle told me to stop playing horror games and wouldn't let me play Doom 3 anymore.
Oh my, that's
From
the
then
game,
on,
Doom 3.
I could only play a Star Wars racing game while staying at my grandmother's house.
Play Fortnite?
I still believe it was not a
Roster.
ghost that I saw that day. It was just an illusion caused by my mental weakness.
Ooh. Come here, boy! Creepy house. How many is this? 25. Why does it say
About
that?
10 years ago, my 3-year-old son and I moved to a house from our apartment. It was a very old building, and the inside of the house always seemed to be just a little darker and just a little colder than it should have been.
Oh,
Not
boy,
long
good.
after we moved in, a friend of mine came to visit. The whole time we were sitting and talking, she seemed very uncomfortable. When I
That's
looked at
wrong,
her
just grab and
face,
say, "Yo, wanna sit
I
here?"
noticed that
Sit there,
something in the other room had caught her
Yeah,
attention.
big love.
Her eyes grew wide and she said, "I have to go."
Don't you want to go?
I asked her what
You
was
go to the
wrong,
room. You don't
but
have
she refused to
You
tell
want
me.
because you're scared. and you're
Her
not-
odd reaction was freaking me out, so I kept after her. On her way out the door, she finally blurted out, "This house is haunted."
What? Wait. No, just 1 minute. You think what type of friends are you hanging out with? Oh, your house is haunted. Your house is haunted. How does she know? What if it's not? Or maybe you know later on in the. Do you want, let's just.
But she wouldn't tell me what it was or what made her think so.
Yeah, what made I think so?
To this day, she still refuses to tell me what she saw.
Probably a dead loved one.
About a week later, my 3-year-old son casually asked me who the old lady in the bathroom was.
Huh?
One day, I was leaving my house for work, and I got to the car and I realized I needed to run back in the house to get something. I walked into the house, and as soon as I got inside, this framed photo on the wall shot off the wall. It didn't fall down. It shot horizontally away from the wall, and it landed on a mosaic table with enough force to break some of the tiles off of it. I felt like whatever was in the house was pissed, and that I came back in after it thought I had left for the day.
Wow.
After living in the house for about 6 months, I noticed a weird square cut into the boards on the deck. There was no
6
handle,
months.
but
You mean for 6
I was
months?
able to
That's
pry it up.
mad.
The hole was just big enough to fit through, and there was a ladder going down. For some reason, I went down and I found myself in what looked like a homemade basement. It was basically just a room dug out of the earth, with no constructed walls or stone supports or anything like that. It was very dark, but I could see something over in the corner.
Stone.
It was a suspicious looking stone. It looked like one of those old headstones you see in cemeteries.
That place is haunted.
Just then, some insects
Yes.
started jumping on me, so I got out of the basement as fast as I could and never went back. Now this is the part that affected me the most. It's also the reason we left the house. One night I was in bed laying on my stomach just about to fall asleep, and I heard someone walk into my
Oh
room.
my god.
The footsteps came from the doorway
Don't
over
say
to my
carpet.
bed.
How could you hear the footsteps?
I didn't realize until later that the fact that I heard the footsteps was weird because the room was
That's
carpeted.
exactly what I've just said.
When the
copycat.
footsteps reached my bed, I felt someone put their hands on my back. 2 hands, just gently laid flat on my back and kept me there.
Rub your little kitten.
I
or
assumed
dog.
it was my son.
I do. I just rub people, you know. I just
What are
rub
you
them.
doing? I asked. But there was no answer. I looked up. No one was
Go check
there.
your son's bedroom.
I got up and checked my son's bedroom, and
Yep.
he was in bed fast asleep. We
Smile,
moved out
could be
soon
him.
after that, and we never looked back.
Yeah, move out, read. Yeah. A merry, not Christmas.
It was the night of Christmas
Oh, this
Eve,
guy's voice.
and I decided to take a walk while the snow was coming down.
Oh, this guy's
I
voice.
love to do that during the Christmas season just to see all of the beautiful decorations and lights that lit the city, which normally was quite dull and lugubrious and low-key due to the small population of the city that I lived in at that time. Christmas was the time when the city came to life, and I loved it. As I arrived into town, it was busy due to all of the shoppers that were picking up those last-minute Christmas presents. As I glided past the Christmas carolers that stood on the side of the sidewalk singing, their voices beautifully echoing about here and there as children played nearby. Laughing and having snowball fights added more of that Christmassy feeling to the jolly atmosphere. It reminded me of that special childhood time that I had growing up as a kid. I missed that. As my eyes glanced up at the icicles that hung from the leafless trees overhead, I decided to cross the street to get me a cup of eggnog that was being sold at one of those stands. But as soon as I started to cross the street, out of nowhere came a large red pickup truck speeding past me, coming mere inches away from hitting me. I then found myself flat on my back, then being helped up to my feet by no other than Santa Claus himself, or should I say, a man dressed like him. "Thank you, Santa," I said to him. He gave a little hint of a smile and nodded. Then he reached into his large red bag and pulled out a box that was wrapped beautifully in gold Christmas paper. I thanked him and headed back home. Halfway home, suddenly I heard bells and the sound of hooves pounding the pavement behind me. When I turned around, there was Santa on his sleigh with reindeer leading the way. And up they went, overhead and over the houses, vanishing quickly into the distance. I must have been a little shooken up from my fall and was hallucinating. Santa Claus? Flying reindeer? When I finally arrived home, I tossed the present under the Christmas tree and headed off to bed. Christmas morning had arrived, and I was excited to see the contents of the gift that Santa had given me. I ripped open the gift as if I were a 5-year-old child again, but all that was inside was a piece of paper, some sort of certificate. When I read it, the look of horror displayed on my face. It was a death certificate that was dated the night prior, and it had my name on it. I dropped the box as my eyes shifted toward the mirror that hung above my fireplace. There was no reflection of me, not even a shadow. I was dead. I had been struck by that truck last night and didn't even know that I had died. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door, so I opened it. There stood the same Santa Claus that helped me up and gave me the present. Is this some sort of sick joke and a magical illusion? I yelled in anger at him. His mouth finally opened as his baritone and raspy voice told me that I had to come with him. He then removed his Santa suit, revealing his true identity, the Grim Reaper.
Well, G-Dems, that was 5 Horror Stories animated by Wancy Entertainment. And I will see you all next time. Bye.